Welcome to the Voice of Retail Special St. Patrick's Day edition. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc from Emmy LeBlanc & Company, and this special edition podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. Continuing along the lines of retail tourism and the deep connection between food, restaurants, and retail experience, I had the exclusive opportunity to sit down with JP McMahon, chef, restaurateur, and owner of Michelin-starred Anir Restaurant, along with Cava Bodega and Tartar Cafe and Wine Bar, all in Galway, Ireland. Chef was visiting Toronto in his role as an officially appointed ambassador of Irish food at an event hosted by Enterprise Ireland and the Ireland-Canada Chamber of Commerce, treating locals here to an amazing breakfast of oysters, organic Irish salmon, many other treats. Check the show notes for a full menu and links to JP's restaurant. We sat down to talk about chefs' approach to dining and retail, food trends in Ireland, and the close parallels to the Canadian restaurant and food scene, and explore new ideas such as cannabis-infused menus. Next, a brief chat with Neil Cooney and Lizzie Curran to discuss the work that goes into making St. Patrick's Day a global phenomenon culturally, politically, and in retail. So let's have a listen now to my feature interview with Chef JP McMahon. Chef, welcome to the Voice of Retail. Nice to see you here in Toronto. Welcome.
Good, thank you.
Tell us what brings you here to Toronto today, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm based in Galway. We have 3 restaurants there. I'm over here, I suppose, representing Ireland, I suppose, in one capacity, and also, I suppose, engaging with some of the chefs at George Brown College, teaching them as well about, I suppose, what I do in Ireland, and I suppose trying to, change the perception of Irish food abroad. One of our restaurants, Anir, which is a Michelin star restaurant, is just uses stuff that is grown in Ireland, and so we exclude a lot of things that people take for granted, like black pepper or vanilla, citrus fruit, and we try and, I suppose, craft a cuisine from what we have to hand in the west of Ireland, and I suppose that has got us to kind of think about, well, what Irish food is and how we can try and elevate it out of its, I suppose, traditional image of that kind of Irish country kitchen, and how do we elevate it towards some of the other great cuisines in the world.
So tell me about how food and cuisine has evolved in Ireland over the past 20 years, or even 10 years or less, because it really sounds like, when I think of Irish food, and we'll talk later about how that relates to Canada, because when you think about Canadian food,
yes,
what is that and how do you get your arms around it? Tell me about the evolution of cuisine and dining in Ireland.
I suppose over the last 10 or 15 years, not only the chefs but also the public have become more food conscious, and I think part of that, you could say the internet plays a massive part in that. I think cheaper airfare, where people being able to travel, and I think that brought a renewed confidence to, I suppose, the products that we have in Ireland. I mean, we've always had great products, but I suppose most of the time in the 20th century, in my mind anyway, we have exported them. So we have taken our best shellfish or our best beef, our best oysters, and we've exported them, and then other, I suppose, cuisines have used them, and we've been, I suppose, a country of producers. And in the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen a lot of chefs and restaurateurs, young farmers, I suppose, take control of that, take control of the market, and to try and create a more indigenous cuisine. And I suppose it happens on two sides of the spectrum. On the one side, you have it on the fine dining side. So we could say Anir is, being a Michelin star restaurant, I suppose, is in some way a fine dining restaurant. Like, we don't have tablecloths, so that is very, very pared back. But if you take, for example, other restaurants such as Chapter One in Dublin, they've always kind of championed their Irish producers, and they opened in the mid 90s. And on the other side, you have an emerging kind of casual dining sector that I suppose when you look at it first, it mightn't seem that there is a support of, I suppose, Irish products, like, say, for our tapas bar, Cava, and one of the reasons why we did Cava, of course, one was to demonstrate our own kind of love of Spanish cuisine. But we also wanted to try and bring the way that the Spanish eat in smaller plates and sharing, and to try and merge that in some way with Irish food.
It's such an interesting approach, right? Because when you were describing what the restaurant was, Spanish food took me a bit by surprise. In other words, it's core Irish ingredients, but served in a different fashion.
Exactly.
Right?
So of course, all of the typical Spanish products, like whether it's the paella rice or the chorizo or the Iberico ham, all of that comes from Spain. But the core products we have, like if it's the beef or the fish, the shellfish, vegetables, all of that is Irish, and all of that we work with smaller producers to I suppose build into it. So even when we did a cookbook a couple of years ago, it was called A Taste of Spain in Ireland, and so we weren't trying to replicate a Spanish restaurant in the same way you would have an Italian trattoria or a French restaurant that wouldn't, I suppose, blend into the local economy, and elements of that grew into a near. And when we did tartare a year and a half ago, we wanted to, again, how do we try and take what we're doing, which is, I suppose, utilising Irish ingredients, and how do we bring them to more people? So we opened up a cafe and wine bar to take a lot of the stuff that we have done in a near, like our soda bread and our scones, different stuff that we serve throughout the tasting menu, and say, well, how do we bring that to a wider audience? And so for me, Irish food is growing in two different parallel ways. One in the kind of casual dining sector, and one in the kind of on the fine dining sectors, and both of them are really, really important. And that's why I suppose I see so many parallels with Canada.
Yeah, let's talk about that. It's interesting because when I think of dining in Canada, when I'm asked to describe it from people, what is Canadian food, and you start to think about what some of the more contemporary restaurants are doing with different cuts of meat and different products, but it's really a little harder to get your arms around describing it in a sense.
I think so, and I think you have the same difficulties trying to define Irish food as well. And when I came here first 5 or 6 years ago, I mean, that's kind of left a resonance with me, because so many of the chefs that we worked with there was that struggle to define, well, what is Canadian food, because we have so much immigration, and we have like Italian, and we have French, and we have North American, and all these, they're kind of almost like a melting pot. And I suppose for me, the more I go into food and the more I research food, I find that I think every cuisine has those problems. It's just that they mightn't necessarily be at the forefront. And I think if you look at Spanish cuisine, or you look at French cuisine, or you look at Italian cuisine, you will find the same uncertainty about what it is if you look hard enough. And I think sometimes we forget that, particularly if you're Irish or you're Canadian, you're preoccupied. Well, what are our dishes? How do I define what we do? But I find you have the same problems if you take an Italian cuisine and you take basil and tomatoes. Neither are from Italy. And I suppose what is it then? Is it the amount of years something has been in place? Is it legacy? And so essentially you take something like a pizza that is the symbol of Italian food, and two of its core ingredients are not of Italian origin, and they're only in Italy the last couple of 100 years. And I suppose I found this mostly through my own research, in terms of I'm writing a book on Irish food at the moment, and of course I had to write this book on Irish food and come up with 500 or 600 recipes, and it got me thinking not only what we do in a near, and what I suppose 7 years ago thought, well, let's do this restaurant that only uses Irish ingredients, and then we had like all these discussions about, well, we use tomatoes. I mean, they're grown in Ireland, but they're not Irish, and you can never. There will always be a porous line. So eventually we started using tomatoes, and then we started using courgettes. And someone said, well, I mean, how come you never had those discussions about the potato? And it was like, well, we should have had those discussions about the potato, because the potato is originally from Peru,
right?
And I think it's whenever you define a cuisine, it's always cherry picking from different elements. And I found since I've started doing this book, and the manuscript is due in now next month, and it's out in 2020. And
your 500 or 600 recipes.
Yeah, and I found
goodness.
I've started to question myself in relation to particularly in relation to spices, because spices have been in Ireland about 800 years. So you can get cinnamon, nutmeg, mace, all these different things that come from Southeast Asia. And they have been in Ireland as long as the spice trade has existed because of a network of travellers. And the question I ask myself is that Irish food? And if it's not Irish food, what is it? Is it food in Ireland? I suppose you can't really answer them in a simple way, but for me, the best way to define Irish food is the practice or the cooking of food in Ireland over a 10,000-year period, and that's Irish food. And that there is many different phases of it, but I think each one is interesting of itself. We have a kind of Viking migration in about the 9th to 10th century that brings in elements of a kind of a Scandinavian cuisine. We have
and now you're seeing a rise of the Nordic kind of
and I don't think we would have a near if it wasn't for the Nordic food revolution. I mean, if they hadn't done what they had done, and possibly they did what they did because the Spanish before them had maybe sidestepped kind of a focus on locality and said, well, let's just produce in terms of Spanish molecular cooking, it was just like, let's just get the ingredients from anywhere, because what's important is the finished product and the taste. And what the Nordics did was, I suppose, in dialogue with that, or in reaction to it, was like saying, well, let's craft a cuisine focused on what we have around us. And if you take away all these different spices that we bring into the country, what's left? And I suppose that's what we've been pursuing, and that is what has brought us to engaging a lot with different seaweeds, engaging a lot.
Yeah, I loved your 14 different types of seaweed. I mean, it's funny.
And we always find new ones. It's amazing.
In your comments about how the Japanese cuisine got way out ahead of that, and we're just really now being discovered.
And I think it's a circumstance of geography. When I've looked into it and I try to say, like, how come seaweed did not take off in Ireland? I mean, I presume the first hunter-gatherers ate it because that's all they had.
Not for lack of being near a sea or the ocean?
No, and the only thing I can think of is that the land was too good.
Right.
And because I looked at Japan, and I was like, well, why have they got such a great fish and seaweed culture? And it's because their land isn't so good. So they had no access to the kind of that pastures where you could rear a load of cattle or a load of lambs, and so they had to look to the sea. And so kind of ironically, the land brought us inwards and focused our attention inwards. And for most of the 20th century, and probably before, I mean, you could almost be excused for thinking that Ireland wasn't an island, because we don't have a great culture, or we didn't have a great culture of eating fish or shellfish. We literally exported it to elsewhere, and all of the, I suppose, different products. I'm thinking specifically of oysters and sea urchins. If you said to people like a sea urchin, sure, like, I mean, that is not something you'd associate with Ireland. But we had a massive wild sea urchin population up to the 70s, and we literally, from talking to older people, trucks would arrive and we would just literally sell them all, and they would bring them off to France and Italy and Spain. And
I think of the parallels between that and the lobster industry in Canada, which the lobster industry, as it's said, is in the early days it was prisoner food. It was yet now Canada is a source of it, and it is a source of pride, and it's a luxury food now. Yeah. So it's fascinating to me how different foods can evolve from being, I guess, not unlike seaweed. It's just
or oysters as well. Oysters were the food of the poor, and nobody wanted them. And I in the research of the book, I came across a lot of recipes for 1890 for oyster and potato soup, because literally they were the two cheapest things that you could get, and you could literally just cook them. And to even imagine making a soup from oysters now would be absolutely scandalous. If you said to someone, "I'm going to blend your oysters," I'm going to boil them and then I'm going to blend them, they would say, "Well, this is a premium product." And the same with lobster.
So interesting.
Yeah, I think. I was literally just reading about Irish lobsters last night, and as they got more expensive, the people stopped eating them because they knew they could get more money for selling them. And there is that kind of certain sense of abstinence in the Irish diet, and maybe it was forced upon a lot of the indigenous population, was that if you had a premium product like butter or lobster, why would you eat it yourself? And you have that even to a certain degree with beef. A lot of people over the last couple of 100 years did not eat beef, they reared it and sold it, and they lived on the dairy that you got from it, or they lived on the eggs from the chicken, but they never ate the chicken unless it was his last legs and it died. Then they ate it, but you wouldn't eat something that produced food. But I do think, I mean, there are great parallels between Canada and Ireland, particularly because I think it's kind of its food culture is in its infancy in trying to define itself, and I think. The best way to do that is to look at the products that you produce, but also not to deny the influence of migration, because I just think it's completely insane when different cultures try and isolate. They go, oh no, our cuisine is an indigenous thing, but there is no cuisine in the world that is indigenous. I mean, I honestly think sometimes the French, when they say, oh, well, we're so indebted to the French and French cuisine, I think really what we're indebted to the French is that the systematic application of it and the writing down of it.
The art and science of it more than
in the 19th century. But I think really what you had is all of these different ideas just landed in this place, and a lot of them came from elsewhere, and it's just they were codified in France, and that's why we are indebted to this model. But really, if you look beyond that, I think you'll find it. You'll find influences from everywhere in any cuisine.
Let's talk about the connection between, as this is a retail podcast, let's talk about the connection between dining, restaurants, and retail and tourism. It's such an important part. I was speaking with some key people in the industry, and they're saying just that no matter where you travel, you're going to eat, and it's going to be I find it more defining characteristic now more than ever of where you go and where you visit, more than the goods you buy and the things you bring home. It's more the experiences and the dining experiences. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, I think for me, gastro tourism, or whatever way of food tourism, is really important, and I suppose that's what brought me first to Toronto. I came over here with Poached Ireland on a benchmarking trip with about 15 others, and they took us to Prince Edward County and showcased us what a community had done when another industry had fallen away, like the canning industry, and the different products that they had began to produce. So you had wine, you had a lot of cheese, you had some cider, and the tourism that brought in, and I can still see the legacy of that trip in many of us that have come, like say Siobhan, who owns St. Tola Cheese in County Clare. From that experience, she built a farm experience around where people could visit the farm, and that's, for me, that's really, really important. As an important kind of aspect of contemporary eating or contemporary.
Is it that connection back to the farm?
Yeah, because I think people want to. They might want to visit the farm, or they might just want to know where they're. But I mean, most younger people are quite conscious. I mean, whereas it might have been for my age group, it was probably a smaller population of people that were like, well, I've always been interested in traveling, and food has always played a part of that. But it seems to be at the forefront of every experience now. That, I mean, you eat 3 times a day, so where are you going to go for breakfast, and where are you going to go for lunch, and where are you going to go for dinner, and you're going to be away for 1 week, and that's 21 meals, and so it does start to play into the economy of that country, and we see it ourselves in, say, for example, Aneer. I mean, 70% of our guests are from North America. And they are coming to Ireland, principally to, I mean, some of them might have Irish heritage. They want to see certain monuments. They want to maybe drive the Wild Atlantic Way or something, and then they also want to eat. Yeah. And it's one of the top 5. So they say, oh, we came to Galway because we wanted to go to Aneer, but we also want to see the Cliffs of Moher, and we're going to take in a bit of the Wild Atlantic Way and go to the Aran Islands.
And while we're here, we want an authentic experience, whatever we define that is. But
they want that. They want food to represent the landscape that they're traveling through, and that's the same for Italy, or it's the same for France, and I mean, for me, Canada has such potential, particularly because it's also a wine growing industry, and that's something that I discovered when I went to Prince Edward County, and I just couldn't get over the fact that they had like these excellent Burgundy style wines that the whole world didn't know about. Because the only thing, if you ask anyone about Canadian wine in Ireland, they'll probably say ice wine, and it's, for me,
for good or ill, we were established a reputation on nice wine.
100%. And that's the same way if you ask someone about Irish cuisine, they'll say, oh, lamb stew or the potato or something like that.
Great salmon, I think. Great
salmon, of course, as well. And I think it's for me, coming back over the 6 years, there's still so much to be done in terms of how to use the Canadian wine industry in terms of tourism, but also in terms of creating that influence in the food community. Because I'm always surprised. I mean, even since we've only been here 2 days, and both of the restaurants that we went to, one of them had 2 Canadian wines and one of them had no Canadian wine. And I just think you're in Toronto. I just think that's the craziest thing ever. And how is that? That's like not only in terms of like a food culture and tourism, but you're talking about the economy, you're talking about jobs, you're talking about, like, for me, it's a no-brainer. It's like it makes such sense for me coming. That's what I want. I mean, I don't want to have an Italian wine when I'm in Canada. In fact, like I might want to. I can go down to the shop, but like really, that's what you want at the forefront, and that's what I found that the tourists. Are looking for that they might love all of the other products, but really when they travel to a certain place, really what they want is a taste of that place, and whether that's through the food and drink or whether it's through the culture. I mean, all of it's going to be some sort of taste experience.
Well, let's talk about something different. We didn't talk about asking this question, but you made me think about something else Canada is now very renowned for, is cannabis.
Oh, yes.
Right. So cannabis, being a recreational cannabis, is legal. Edible products are not legal yet, but that's coming down the horizon. So I know that there's a lot of chefs who are starting to think about how that integration of, we know that there's going to be cannabis tourism in the country. Early days, I mean, we probably taking some lessons from the wine. And I think a lot of chefs are starting to think about what that looks like in their articulation of their menus. I don't know if you had any thoughts of that.
No,
but it's something different.
It's a really interesting question, because when you take cannabis and hemp and you can make oil from it, and you can use it as a flavor enhancer, in the same way we used Woodruff in the custard tart. Woodruff is a wild herb that when you dry it, it has a marzipan flavor. So I can absolutely see that in the way that you might use cannabis as a flavor enhancer in terms of oil, or in terms of dried and put in something. So I can definitely see. I can definitely see that. I only realised that because I was saying to Owen, who brought us over, why is there so many signs for that you can't bring cannabis in? Because he said because it's legal now in here, but you can't bring it into. That's
the picture. When I was in Ireland, I showed the picture of the deposit. So it's a bin as you're about to get on the plane, saying put your cannabis here. Because in Canada you can travel within the provinces, but you can't leave the country.
Yes,
and you can't even bring it into the country. Even though it's legal, so you have to almost remind people. And I think that the breakthrough is going to be, and it's going to take a generation, is now you know what you're buying in the product. So you can get a CBD derivative with very little cycle effects.
Yes.
And so now you're just, as you say, what does it do to the taste of the food, and what characteristics does it bring? It's very, in some ways, early days. In other days, it's been around for many years, kind of underground. But it seems like, I wouldn't say it's going to come into the mainstream in the next 18 months, but it's going to start.
It certainly will. It certainly will come true eventually. In the same way that I think Seaweed is one of those products where when we started using it 7 years ago, it was still a very niche thing, and now, when you go into the supermarket, you can see so many different seaweed products, because I suppose one aspect of it that I never really considered, because I was looking at it from a taste point of view, was then all of a sudden you had a nutritional point of view. And people were saying, oh, like it's really good in vitamins and minerals, and when you dry it, you can blend it with this, and you can put it in flour mixes, you can put it in soups. And that's a whole other industry, like the health industry, where we have this product that we're sitting on that represents, for me, a certain aspect of Irish cuisine, and we're not utilising it. And actually, ironically, I think there's still some controversy down in Kerry, because the Irish government sold a lot of the seaweed harvesting rights to a Canadian company without talking to the people, the locals. And because they thought nobody wanted it, they said, "Oh shit, it's just hanging around there." And then all of a sudden, they sold it, and I think now
the Canadian carpetbaggers came in and
they said,
it.
"Oh, there's going to be Mounties down policing the beaches, saying get away from our seaweed." And I think now it's stuck somewhere in the European court, because now they're saying, well, you couldn't have sold it because it was ours, and it's like, but it's still something I think that can be that can be utilised, that still hasn't broken into the mainstream yet, and most people still would not see it as a defining characteristic of Irish food. Everyone would understand oyster, and people would get the salmon, but it's just something that I would try when I'm traveling. I think it's an important, the wild food aspect and the seaweed are just two little insights where people can walk away and go, I didn't realise that about Irish food. In the same way that when I came out of Canada, I mean, for me, when I think of Canada now, I think of Pinot Noir. And I never would have thought of that 7 years ago. And when people say to me, what's good about Canadian food and wine, I say, they produce really good Pinot Noirs. And people, I have had friends come here that would seek out Pinot Noir, and that it's like a little ripple effect, and you don't realise where it's going to go. But that's why, I mean, tourism, particularly in relation to the restaurant and also the retail, and it's getting products that represent areas where people can feel that they bring back a certain aspect of that area. So if I bring back a bottle of Pinot Noir and I give it to our sommelier, he's gone, oh God, that's really fantastic, and then he talks to his friends, and
it's unique, and it's something different, and it has a character.
And it's just literally it's a slow process, and I don't think no amount of huge marketing budgets will quicken it. I think it's a slow process, and you really have to do the work on the ground,
organic, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's that's why the tourist experience is so important, because literally people are eating 3 or 4 times a day, and if you have people who, whether it's the restaurant or in the retail space, that can say, oh, hi, how are you? Oh, I see you guys are from Ireland. Would you like to try some Canadian wine? Which is just, it still seems that people don't realise that they're like sitting on a gold mine. You know, they, in the same way that we have with maybe our shellfish and our seaweed. It's literally saying people, well, I mean, they're not asking for us, so let's not give it to them. So, I mean, I really think we need to do that. And in relation to Irish food, and we really need to try and push fish and shellfish to the fore, because we've always had that behind our beef and our lamb and our bacon and our pork. But really, what we have a chance to do is to try and emulate what the Japanese have done, and that is to treat fish and shellfish in the same way we treat cattle. And the Japanese have done that, and there's some amazing fishermen who are now using various techniques such as ikijimi, which is like when you kill the fish instantly when you catch it, because it produces a better fish. But if you said that to an Irish fisherman, he'd be like, they're just fish. You catch them in a net. But like if you said to people, do you want to round up the cows and get them in a net and suffocate them all? You go, no, you wouldn't do that, because it's inhumane. And you go, well, that's what we're doing with the fish. And that's why...
We're like boiling the lobsters, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's very similar.
Very same. And it's like, how do you get the best taste out of this product? And just because it's come from the sea, it doesn't mean it's any less valuable.
So for listeners who are going to make their way to Ireland, tell them a bit about where they can find your restaurants. And you've got a book coming out, so you've got several restaurants. Galway, I believe.
Galway, and they're all in Galway. They're all in the city centre. And here is our fine dining Michelin star restaurant.
Congratulations, Michelin
Thank
star.
you.
Great accomplishment.
Every year, it's still a surprise every year, because it's just never. There's no you get no evaluation or no nod, or so
it just comes out, right?
It just comes out every year, and I suppose you wait there, and you're happy to keep it. And Tartar, a cafe in Weimar, has a Michelin Bib Gourmand, and that's literally just across the road. We also run a food symposium every October. We bring about 50 chefs to Galway and run a food symposium called Food on the Edge. And yeah, if anyone is travelling to Ireland, come and meet us and have a little taste. I mean, we're on the west coast, so you can fly into Shannon, you can drive up, and there's some beautiful scenery, but there's also some beautiful producers that you can visit along the way. And there's plenty of them there. Yeah,
short 2 hour. I took the train from Dublin to Galway. It's short, nice little train ride.
Even the drive now, since they finally built a motorway. Yeah. You know, you take motorways for granted over this side of the world, but it's only 2 hours now from Galway to Dublin in a car. And I remember when I first went down to Galway in '99, it was like a 6-hour bus drive through every small village and stopping along the way. So it has changed a little bit.
Well, thanks so much for taking time, Chef. It was a real treat to meet you, and really enjoyed the food today. And best of luck.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Hi, this is Jackie Ross from J. Ross Retail Recruiters. Join me and the leaders from the Canadian retail cannabis industry at the Retail Council of Canada Cannabis Summit, March 26th in Toronto. You'll hear from executives from Westleaf, Cannabis New Brunswick, High Tide Ventures, Mihi Cannabis, and Fire and Flower. Plus, I'll be moderating a panel on hiring for the retail cannabis industry featuring Chiaro, Alcanna, National Access Cannabis, and the Friendly Stranger Corporation. That's RCC Cannabis Forum, March 26th. Learn more and register at retailcouncil.org.
Neil and Lizzie, welcome back to The Voice of Retail, your second time on the podcast. Great to see you both on this March 18th, so St. Patrick's Day +1, I should say.
Yes.
So welcome back.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you for having us back. Yeah, it's St. Patrick's Day +1, so we're still standing after all of the events and the fantastic program of just wonderful kind of celebrations of Irishness all over the world, but particularly in our case in Canada. So it's great to join you.
Well, you know what I wanted to chat about briefly. It's so impressive to the degree that you marshal up such an effort, both at the political level. I saw your Prime Minister visiting the U.S. Sitting in America, but also at the business level. Yesterday, I was watching QVC in the States, and they had, the Irish St. Patrick's Day, and I saw other businesses having 17% off sales. And really, I wanted to chat about how that came to pass. Really, that Ireland came, and I think you're at the forefront of it in terms of, small country looking outwards. And marshalling so much effort together to build business for Irish companies. It's really quite phenomenal. How does this all come together?
Sure, I think it's been in development for generations probably. So it's something that has taken a long time, I think, to get to this level of what you're describing as being a fairly professional, together, comprehensive, clear way of promoting Ireland across so many levels. So it's not been an overnight success or an overnight journey. But there's one or two things I'd mentioned. Enterprise Ireland is running a campaign at the moment under our Irish Advantage banner, which is small country, big impact. And I think that probably encapsulates what you're talking about. It's how many countries have this window onto the world once a year where they get to talk about Irishness. So it's been our.
It's hard to find a parallel for it when you think about it. I mean, there's you can't. It's hard to name another country and other countries celebrating their day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And we have great plans for making it more than once a year. So we've Samhain, which is Halloween, is a distinctly Irish festival by heritage. So we've a lot of celebrations that we're going to start underpinning with the Halloween celebrations, which are huge in Canada and North America.
Halloween is one of those one of this huge big retail events because pretty much everybody celebrates. It's fairly agnostic in terms of it's not Christmas or it's not anything else. It's a big retail day.
Yeah, and so we would say that we're constantly evolving and trying to improve our message. So one of the factors of success in that is you've mentioned that there is the political dimension. So we traditionally have had an opportunity to leader to leader have an audience in the United States at the White House. That's multifaceted now across right now in terms of Brexit. A diversification agenda that we're pursuing in terms of trade.
Yeah. All the CETA agreements with Canada. And
we've had government ministers all over Europe at this pretty important time, making sure that we're connecting with people, be they Irish or just important in terms of how we're engaging with the international community at large. So I would say that it has a number of touchstones. There's political, there's obviously business because we're a highly open, innovative economy. We trade with practically every country out there. Education is really important. We have a huge education in Ireland brand, which means that people are having a fantastic time getting a high quality education in Ireland at our universities and institutes of technology. They are, I suppose, what we would then go on what we would term to be new diaspora. So there's someone who has spent time in Ireland, really understood what the country offers, had some of the fantastic food, the beverages, drinks that we produce, but also has that real understanding that there's a high quality, dynamic economy at the back of it all. So there's all of these different layers, and I think where our government has had a success, and indeed Enterprise Ireland, is that we tend to work together and pull on those strands together as a team and present what is essentially the best of Ireland, and that links me back to that piece, the small country and the big impact. We know we have to act together as a team, and then we get a much better representation of Ireland overseas. What's really important, and it absolutely should be said, is we do have this fantastic diaspora all over the world, which is just a ready support and a ready audience for that messaging as well. So
you got your own parade in many places, which is again fairly unique. Lizzie, you and I spent a fair bit of time in January at the Irish Showcase, and we met lots of interesting technological companies. So it really seems that Ireland continues to foster and grow great technologies that are looking themselves to export. How are you finding those companies in terms of reaching out to you and them looking for businesses here in Canada for retails or for other sections?
So I work on the retail technologies portfolio for Enterprise Ireland, and so a lot of our retail technologies clients at the moment, they'd initially reach out to us. What we do is a lot of them are kind of going global companies. So obviously as they're online and stuff like that. What we do is we organise a range of events throughout the year, and any companies that would be in my portfolio, we'd invite them. So for example, we'd have an inward buyer visits. So we get a range of kind of high-class C-suite people back with us to Ireland, and I guess just influential people in say the retail space, and bring them back to Ireland, and buyers to meet up with our retail technologies clients there, and that can be a good start for them in entering the market and also in expansion. And other things that we do would be bring our pay for our retail technologies clients to come out to the market and
experience it firsthand.
I guess we bring them to say trade shows, or we can organise what we call market study visits, where again it would kind of be the opposite. So we'd arrange for them to meet up with buyers within the market, and that's how they kind of get a foothold in how it all works and start doing business here. So it's a range of ways.
It's a great resource for Irish-based companies to reach out to Canada. So congratulations to you both on behalf of your entire country for doing such a great job. Even today with food and food tourism, and I just had a great interview, chit and chat with Chef JP, and just talking about the similarities between our two markets in terms of defining themselves. So I think there's lots of lessons to be learned.
Sure, absolutely, and as a parting remark, I suppose you mentioned the confluence of politics, business, food, retail. One of the appointments that our Minister Bruton had, who was the lead minister for visiting to Toronto this year around St. Patrick's, he visited Holt Renfrews, where an Irish company has just helped redesign their customer experience measurement and management platform. So that company, CX Index, has a fantastic relationship with Holt's. It's making a real meaningful difference to how they're engaging with their customer base, and it's powered by technology from an Irish company. And Minister Bruton was there to host that announcement, and it's featured in kind of media around the world, particularly Ireland and Canada. So these are the great touch points that we like to try and put all those stories together, because it's a story of how much impact the country is having, the quality, the uniqueness, the innovation that's happening. So
and the collaboration between business and government, and both in Ireland and around the world.
Absolutely. So I hope you really enjoyed your Michelin-starred breakfast.
That's a wrap on this very special St. Patrick's Day edition of The Voice of Retail. I'm Michael LeBlanc. You can learn more about me at www.meleblanc.co. That's meleblanc.co. Stay tuned for our next regular edition of the podcast, available each and every Friday. Until then, have a great week.